de talla internacional en el marco de las actividades de conversaciones, un evento con el que deseamos pararnos a pensar sobre el futuro del periodismo y sobre su papel en la sociedad, fundador de la Universidad de Navarra. Por eso y por darnos esta oportunidad y por la fortuna de que esté entre nosotros, quiero agradecer mucho con el nuevo presidente para visitarnos y compartir estas horas de conversación sobre periodismo. Me toca presentar a Marty y no es una tarea sencilla. Lo voy a hacer en castellano con su permiso porque comprende perfectamente castellano y además aquí tampoco Trump me va a decir nada por lo del castellano. Seguramente muchos de los presentes ya saben algo de él, aunque solo sea por haber visto Spotlight, la película que hace un año ganó los Oscars al mejor film y al mejor guión, entre otros muchos premios, y en la que nuestro invitado, en su época como director del Boston Globe, fue interpretado con brillante sobriedad, de forma casi estoica, por Liv Schreiber. Quienes no hayan visto la película y no conozcan su trayectoria, seguramente están aquí porque no todos los días se puede hablar con el director del Washington Post, el mítico diario estadounidense conocido por los papeles del Pentágono, el Watergate, también por Janet Cook y El mundo de Jimmy, aunque esto solo sea para la gente ya más mayor, pero más recientemente con Marty como director desde 2013 por las informaciones sobre el espionaje de la NSA a millones de ciudadanos estadounidenses, destapado por los papeles de Edward Snowden, y que le valió al periódico el Pulitzer al servicio público compartido con el Guardian. O también, ya más recientemente, por la publicación en la última campaña electoral del insultante vídeo en el que Donald Trump se refiere con desprecio a las mujeres y que inspiró, en cierto modo, la reciente marcha femenina sobre Washington. La magnífica trayectoria de Marty Baron como director del Boston Globe, el diario ganó 6 Pulitzers en los 11 años que estuvo al frente del periódico, y como director del Washington Post ha ganado 4 Pulitzers en 4 años. Forma parte de una carrera periodística de 4 décadas que se inició en 1936 en el Miami Herald, nada más terminar sus estudios de periodismo y su máster en administración de empresas, una mezcla que supongo que debía ser no muy normal en aquella época. Su oficio se forjó durante casi 20 años en Los Angeles Times y de allí pasó a puestos de máxima responsabilidad editorial en algunos de los diarios más importantes de los Estados Unidos. Otra vez en el Miami Herald, el ya citado Boston Globe como director, el New York Times y finalmente el Washington Post. No es de extrañar que con una trayectoria tan brillante, la revista Esquire se preguntara en 2015 si no era Marty Baron el mejor director de periódicos de todos los tiempos. Seguramente no le gustó mucho este titular a Marty Baron. Todo lo comentado es más que suficiente para despertar el interés de los futuros periodistas que están aquí, y comunicadores que están en el aula, y también de muchas otras personas que nos acompañan. Sin embargo, y no pretendo extenderme, creo que hay al menos 3 razones adicionales o 3 factores que hacen que las reflexiones de Marty Baron hoy tengan especial interés y actualidad. El primer factor, la primera razón es la crisis del negocio de los medios. Marty Baron y Jeff Bezos, fundador de Amazon y propietario del Washington Post desde octubre de 2013, están protagonizando una de las historias más interesantes de reivindicación del periodismo de calidad, como negocio y como actividad, con una misión y un alma especial. A Marty no le gusta hablar de brands, le gusta hablar de souls, de almas, en un momento en el que casi solo se escucha a los profetas del desastre sobre el futuro del periodismo. Decía Don Bradley, el famoso director del Washington Post, que por cierto, cuando era joven y vivía en París, venía algunos fines de semana a pasarlos a Pamplona y a San Juan de Luz. Decía Bradley que solo hay una cosa que un director de periódicos necesita para ser un buen director, y no es otra que un buen propietario. Sin duda, el periodismo de calidad necesita hoy de ambos, de buenos directores y de buenos propietarios, más que nunca en su historia. El segundo factor es la amenaza de los populismos, más en concreto su encarnación en Estados Unidos en las seguramente futuras políticas del presidente Trump. Marty Baron y el Washington Post, con muchos otros medios estadounidenses, están en el punto de mira de la ya denominada guerra de Trump contra los periodistas, que han sido definidos en su última visita a la sede central de la CIA, y no es una de sus definiciones más hirientes, ni mucho menos, como el grupo humano más deshonesto de la Tierra. Seguramente esta situación de antagonismo entre el poder y los medios va a hacer vender muchos periódicos, pero también va a suponer grandes desafíos para todos ellos y para la profesión en su conjunto. El tercer factor, y voy acabando, es la era postfactual, posverdad, o como queramos llamarla, del papel que juega en ella el periodismo. El periodismo profesional, el trabajo que se lleva a cabo en las redacciones del Washington Post y de tantos otros grandes y pequeños, magníficos medios de todo el mundo, tiene como resultado noticias e informaciones que se disuelven, se diluyen, sin orden ni concierto, en el ruido generalizado que rodea a los temas de actualidad. Los datos se mezclan con las opiniones, las verdades con las mentiras, las noticias con los rumores y bulos, las denominadas fake news, y ahora, desde hace unos pocos días, también con los datos o hechos alternativos. De hecho, mi comentario sobre Bradley y sus visitas a Pamplona podría ser perfectamente un hecho alternativo, un bulo, una falsedad, para dar un toque de color a esta presentación. O podría no serlo, vaya usted a saber, ¿no? En este contexto, el periodismo tiene ante sí un trabajo ingente de reafirmación, de recuperación de la legitimidad y de reconquista de su espacio, y del papel, de reconquista del papel que ha jugado históricamente como institución central de las sociedades democráticas. Creo que estas tres claves, factores o escenarios de fondo pueden ser interesantes para contextualizar esta reunión con Marty Baron y para pensar sobre los retos de nuestra profesión, pensando sobre todo en el futuro, en los futuros profesionales y qué se van a encontrar en el mercado laboral. Ayer él se reunió en Madrid para hablar sobre estos temas con la flor y nata del periodismo español y hoy lo hace aquí en las aulas de la universidad con la flor y nata del futuro del periodismo. Muchísimas gracias, Marty, y son todos.
Gracias. Bueno, gracias por invitarme al campus de la Universidad de Navarra. Voy a decir algunas palabras en español y voy a cambiar de idioma para mi charla. Es un honor y un placer estar aquí y tener la oportunidad, la ocasión de abordar el tema de los retos y las oportunidades y las responsabilidades de nuestro campo de periodismo. Me gustaría pasar la mayor parte de nuestro tiempo juntos contestando sus preguntas. Lamento que no haya traducido mi charla al castellano. Si lo hubiera hecho, habría sido un lío. Mi charla no abarca el tema de la administración de Trump, pero podemos abordar ese tema durante la sesión de preguntas y respuestas. Aunque yo sé que a nadie le interesa ese tema. Y estoy dispuesto a recibir sus preguntas en español y tratar de contestarlas en español también. Bueno, para cambiar de idioma. It's great to be speaking with all of you today. You are the ones who will decide what journalism looks like and how well it serves the public in coming decades. Long after I've retired, which is not that many years off, as you can see, you'll still be in the early stages of your careers. So I'd like to talk to you about how I feel our profession is evolving, how I feel you can prepare for what's to come, what I see as your opportunity, and what I see as your responsibility. I'm very eager to see whether your generation can deliver what the public needs from us as journalists, and whether you can build a sustainable model of journalism that informs your generation. I think you can. I'm hopeful, but it is going to be challenging. And I hope that you are up for a good challenge. I think it is worth it. First, let me say that there is much you can learn here from your professors. I've spent 4 decades in this field. I benefited greatly from the wisdom and dedication of my own journalism professors. Any time that I've confronted an issue of standards or ethics or journalistic rigor, I can actually hear their advice. Essential to a successful future in this field is a strong foundation, and this is the place and this is the time to build it. I also happen to know, or suspect, that you sometimes wonder whether you are being trained for a profession that will no longer exist, at least in any meaningful or fulfilling form. And your parents might be wondering that too. And as you surely know, there are many people in our profession who openly doubt the wisdom of training people for a profession that supposedly suffers from diminishing job prospects. As a profession, you know, we can be famously and even perversely gloomy. After the movie Spotlight came out, I asked a good friend of mine whether his children, one in college and one recently graduated from college, had seen the movie, and whether he had encouraged them to do so. And he said, "No, I did not." And I asked, "Why not?" And he said, "I'm afraid they might be inspired to go into journalism." Well, I am not among the pessimists. I've said that on many occasions. I am optimistic and I am hopeful about our profession. And I am especially encouraged by what I see in your generation. That's okay. I can drink from a bottle. In fact, this is too fancy for me. I'm going to prefer the bottle. I am especially encouraged by what I see in your generation of journalists, because you come with the skills required. Many of you think well, you write well, and I know that the candidates who apply to us at the Washington Post for jobs, they are bright, they are energetic, they are enthusiastic, they love what journalism can do, and they understand its essential role in our society. And this is a time of great experimentation in our profession. And you have a chance to reinvent the profession for a new era. An era in which people consume information differently, but an era in which you can reach far more people than ever before. Now, contrary to what many assume, much of this experimentation is taking place within traditional news organizations. I am proud that the Washington Post has been a leader on this front. We were pleased last year when Fast Company magazine put us in the #1 position on its list of most innovative media companies in the world. And then later in the year, Digiday declared the Post the most innovative publisher of 2015. And I think it's notable that 3 legacy news organizations, CNN, the New York Times, and the Washington Post, have all surpassed some of the digital upstarts like Huffington Post and BuzzFeed in the number of monthly visitors to their digital platforms. Maybe it's taken us too long to learn what's required in a digital age, but there's no question that we have gone to school and put our newfound knowledge to work. But of course, there's a lot more to do. A great deal of the innovation in our field is coming out of new young companies funded by venture capital, and that presents encouraging job opportunities for all of you. They may not be the sorts of jobs that your professors and I first held, but they are jobs that will be at the forefront of a rapidly changing field. Now, I know as well as anyone how difficult things have been and how tough they remain, and that nothing will get easier in the future. But difficult does not equal impossible. You should never forget that, whether you're thinking as journalists in pursuit of a story or in pursuit of a solid business model. We are not doing ourselves any favors if all we see are obstacles while losing sight of the opportunities. Still, you do need to know this. You will have to enter this field with no sense of entitlement. You will be given nothing. You will have to earn everything. You will have to rely on your own hard work and your own ingenuity. You will need a spirit of possibility. Now, you'll need some basics also. Number 1, how to report well, fairly, honestly, and accurately, digging beneath the surface for the real story. Number 2, how to write, how to put words together so that ideas are clear, and ideally so that they leave readers engaged and excited. At best, they will take people into a world that is apart from their own, so that they see things in a fresh light. Number 3, you will need to be curious about the world around you, keenly aware of the limitations of your own knowledge and your own life experience, and wary of making assumptions. You need to be more impressed by what you do not know than by what you do know. Number 4, you'll need to learn contemporary skills of video, audio, perhaps some basic coding, data collection and analysis, how to make your own charts, things of that sort. These are becoming required tools of the profession. Number 5, you will have to master new forms of storytelling. that have emerged. This includes writing in a different style, more conversational, more accessible, with a stronger voice and more personality, while also using the new tools that we have today. Number 6, you will need to be comfortable with the contemporary ways that people receive and process information. Be expert in social media, how to use it as a reporting tool, and how to use it to promote stories, because promoting stories is now the journalist's own responsibility. Number 7, you will need to be comfortable with metrics. How your work performs in the digital arena will be measured. There is no doubt about that. Overall, you will need to be comfortable with the idea that you have a role in assuring that the place you work is a commercial success, even as you observe ethical and professional standards. Journalists of my generation did not have to think that way. We did not have to think about that. In fact, we rejected the idea, but those days are over. Ultimately, you will have to enter the profession recognizing that the web, the internet, is a different medium, that it calls for an approach that is distinct from newspapers and radio and television. You will probably have to think of mobile as a medium of its own as well. Beyond those basics, our field will require a different kind of person. We will require more than just employees. That's what we needed in the past. Now we will need entrepreneurs. Journalists will have to be entrepreneurs. You will be creating entirely new companies, or you will be working in entrepreneurial ventures that will constantly expect inspired and innovative ideas. You will have to become an entrepreneur within larger organizations too, because they need to compete with the startups and smaller, more nimble outfits, and because they will be asked to transform organizations that have stood strong for decades, but now worry about making it through tomorrow. Now for you, all of this is good news. It's good news for smart, skilled journalists who are new to the profession. It used to be that people who were new to our profession had to wait in the back of the line for an amazingly good job. Now they can move with astonishing speed to the front of the line, jumping over veterans who are unable or unwilling to learn what they should. It used to be that we would hire people who could learn from us. Now we hire people who can teach us something we do not know. Now let me talk about something that almost never gets mentioned in a discussion of the future of journalism. And it happens to be something that remains the same. And it is this: nothing is more important than having a good idea. Even more important than the new tools you use will be the thinking you do. Most important is always the journalist's own mind. You cannot deliver a good story without a good idea for one, and good ideas about how to construct the story. You cannot have a successful new product if it is not rooted in a smart idea. Metrics can tell you how you did, but they will not necessarily tell you what to work on. Imagination, creativity, resourcefulness, and insight still matter. They are intangibles, but they are hugely important. Finally, the journalists of tomorrow will have to come to work with a strong sense of mission. If we really want to succeed, we have to recognize that the business is unlikely to succeed if we don't come to work every day determined to pursue a mission. The mission and the business cannot be separated. They depend on each other. The mission, as we heard, is sometimes called our brand, and I prefer to think of it as our soul. It begins with informing our communities and our country, because trustworthy information is essential to civil society and to a healthy democracy. And at the center of our mission, in my view, is holding powerful institutions and powerful individuals accountable. And that's why I'm so glad that the movie Spotlight, against all odds, was made, and against all odds, won the Oscar for Best Picture. I hope that it reminds the public that, despite its flaws, the press is necessary. I hope it helps people understand why investigative reporting is so necessary and what's required to do it right. I hope it causes our profession, no matter the enormous change, no matter the financial challenge, to rededicate itself to investigative reporting. And I hope that the movie Spotlight inspires a new generation of journalists to see that this work is essential and a fulfillment of our highest purpose. The Boston Globe investigation that inspired the movie exposed a decades-long cover-up of sexual abuse within the Catholic Church and led ultimately to similar revelations about the Church worldwide. The result was a public good. A powerful institution and powerful individuals were forced to answer for grave wrongdoing. The rewards of that work came before there was any idea for a movie. And they matter more to me than whatever attention I now receive because Spotlight was made and won an Oscar for Best Picture. And I want to give you a sense of that. After the Globe's first story was published in January of 2002, I received a letter from Father Thomas P. Doyle. He had waged a long and lonely battle within the church on behalf of abuse victims. And he wrote me in that letter these words: "This nightmare would have gone on and on were it not for you and the Globe staff. As one who has been deeply involved in fighting for justice for the victims and survivors for many years, I thank you with every part of my being. I assure you," he wrote, "that what you and the Globe have done for the victims, the church, and society cannot be adequately measured. It is momentous, and its good effects will reverberate for decades." I kept that letter, I kept Father Doyle's letter on my desk in Boston until the day 4 years ago that I left to join the Washington Post. For me, it was a reminder of what brought me to journalism in the first place and what kept me in journalism for 40 years. I hope that you can someday receive a letter like that. For those who chose a career in journalism, you will know that you chose well. If you watched the movie, and I hope you did, you know that an important theme is whether the Globe could have gotten to this story sooner. And last year, I talked about this issue in a speech to the members of a group called Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests. If you saw the movie, you know that there's a reference to that group in the movie. Phil Saviano, who's a survivor of abuse, first meets with the Globe reporters, and he mentions his participation in that group. And asked how many members there were in the organization, he says 10 at his last chapter meeting. Now, the convention I spoke to in Chicago had 300 people attending. Many were there for the first time, and they were motivated by the movie to finally speak openly about their abuse to their family, to their friends, and to the public, and to push for accountability for the church. I thought I owed those individuals a discussion about why the journalism profession does not always fulfill its highest ideals, why we miss stories, why we did not look as deeply as we should have into this story for so long. This, after all, turned out to be a scandal that was massive in scale and shocking in its depravity. A scandal that represented a betrayal of everything the church said it stood for. And it was perpetrated against the most vulnerable to protect the most powerful. Let me be clear, it was not just the Globe that could have done more sooner. I doubt that there is a major news organization in the world that did not have similar scandals in its own territory, that had not heard at least some evidence of similar wrongdoing that might have sparked more curiosity and ultimately more thorough investigation. As I told abuse survivors in Chicago, I think it is fair to ask why our profession did not act sooner. And I imagine that there are many reasons. The power of the church in so many communities, a fear of offending so many readers, fear of being labeled anti-Catholic, which was a charge that was routinely leveled by the church against journalists whose work met with disapproval from bishops and cardinals. And the list of reasons, possible reasons, goes on. The huge effort required to document a scandal of this magnitude. Disbelief that an institution of such high purpose could engage in such horrible behavior. Skepticism that individual cases of abuse were representative of a widespread pattern. The seeming inability, until the Globe proved otherwise, to gain access to internal church documents. And there are surely other possible reasons too. The journalists are always busy with other things and always have more than they can reasonably handle. That journalists are routinely approached by individuals alleging huge scandals, so few of which turn out to be scandals at all. That the people who make scandal allegations can at times seem overly obsessed and somewhat unhinged. A former colleague has said, we must figure out who is really crazy and who has been driven crazy by what has happened to them. Now, it always amuses journalists and sometimes dismays us when people who are seeking a newsroom's attention see conspiracy in what we choose to do and in what we don't do. I have never witnessed a newsroom conspiracy of any sort. I have witnessed a lot of chaos. A newsroom's barely controlled chaos, the decentralized, often in-the-moment decision-making, so often explains the stories we pursue and the many stories that we miss. I firmly believe that ours is a necessary profession, essential to civil society. But the profession is also profoundly imperfect. Journalists often admire swagger, excessive confidence in their colleagues. And confidence, of course, can be an asset. But modesty is a quality that we need as well, because our missteps are many, and our missed stories are many too. Now, there's a scene in Spotlight as the Boston Globe is about to publish the first story in its investigation, and suddenly in my office, the Spotlight team finds itself in an awkward, tense exchange on whether it could have had the story sooner and why it did not. Now, that scene did not actually occur in real life. My dialogue in it was heavily drawn from an email that I sent to Josh Singer, the film's co-writer, after he asked me why I felt the Globe had not gotten to the story sooner. And in the movie, my character says this: sometimes it's easy to forget that we spend most of our time stumbling around in the dark. Suddenly, the light is turned on, and there's a fair share of blame to go around. Now, many journalists have told me over many months that scene expresses so well how they often feel about their work. Stumbling around in the dark. There is so much to cover. The resources are limited. It's hard to judge how to spend your time given all the pressures. And we're working with fragments of information and sources whose credibility is unclear. Often it's hard to know what to make of what we have. Does it signal something big, or will it add up to almost nothing? It can take a lot of reporting to find out, and there is not always time. And yet I do think one lesson from this particular line of coverage, the high-level, decades-long cover-up of sexual abuse within the Catholic Church, does point to how our profession can and must improve. We need to be better listeners. As journalists, we are supposed to be good at this. But we are not always as good as we should be. And I've been consumed lately by this idea of listening. That's because I have become dismayed by how much of media today is not about listening, but is all about talking. Shouting, actually, when it comes to television and to radio and to some ideologically driven internet sites. And as we talk, we have turned up the volume to a level where we can scarcely hear each other. A lower volume would allow us to not just hear better, but to really listen. No doubt, my profession could have listened more closely to the individuals who sought our attention to the abuse that they suffered. We might have exposed the breadth and the depth of this horrible scandal far sooner. To me, there is no point in assessing blame, but there is every reason to learn something from the experience. It should allow us to do better the next time we are told of grave wrongdoing. The movie Spotlight has many messages that I hope will be received by the public and the media itself, including its owners, top executives, and editors. Among them, as I mentioned earlier, is the need to rededicate ourselves to investigative reporting. If we do not hold powerful institutions and powerful individuals accountable, who will? But the movie and the story behind it, I believe, hold another lesson for every one of us in the press. We need to listen better, to listen more closely to those who have fallen to the margins of society or been pushed there, to listen more generously to people who lack power, to listen more generously to the vulnerable whose voices may be weak, but whose words carry a message that must not be ignored. Those voices may reveal a truth that others are seeking to suppress. And as journalists, it is our job to bring that truth to light and then to tell the world. Thank you for having me.
Muy bien, tenemos un buen rato para preguntas después de esta inspiradora intervención de Marty, a quien vuelvo a agradecer por aconsejar también a los futuros alumnos para su futuro periodístico. Simplemente lo que voy a pedir, hay dos micrófonos creo en el aula, en ambos carriles, de la izquierda y la derecha, que quien quiera preguntar se levante, se presente, diga quién es y haga su pregunta en castellano o en inglés, y Marty contestará en castellano o en inglés o en lo que él quiera.
Vamos a ver.
Sí.
Hola. First of all, thank you for listening. A question. Well, everyone is interested now. You're doing very critic, especially recently, to talk about how Trump is, President Trump and the United States is liberty of speech and press and similar. I like how Trump is also the video how he called dollar fake news. I don't continue or the most documents, certainly what done. And thirdly, another is that the Washington Post is not behind any political party, but behind the book, and I think that is what it should be. And we can't deny that most newspapers are not, for example, BuzzFeed. Newspaper where you can find news as listing as the type of read that you value or determine your personality. And how Facebook had to hire a company just to justify fake news that sometimes comes to the press and things like that, I think that we can deny that. We should say better journalism, but we can deny that more part of the actual happening.
Yeah, so I'm not sure of the question, but I get the point. And I have to say that I'm completely shocked that the first question was about Donald Trump. I'm totally surprised. So, in any event, let me address this. So yes, our new president has said during his campaign, and he has said since he was sworn into office that he's waging a war on the media. He has called us every name in the book. He's called us dishonest. He's called us garbage. He called us the lowest form of humanity. And then that was not enough, so he called us the lowest form of life itself. He called us scum, which I had to look up in Spanish, escoria. It's a great word. And he's called us the enemies. And continues to do that. And I think that there are certainly segments of his administration, his closest advisors, who were with him during the campaign, who view us in that way. We have to do our job. That's what we have to do. It's the same job that we had before he became president, and it would be true of whether we had Hillary Clinton in office or and now that we have Donald Trump in office. And that is that we try to cover the president, his administration, or her administration, if it had been Hillary Clinton, with honesty, with energy. We try to do it honorably. Our job is to get at the truth. We don't always succeed, but we work at it. Our mission is to try to determine the truth as best we can. And we're going to continue with that mission during this administration. And if the administration decides to say things that are absolutely false, as it has done on several occasions already in the first week of its administration, we will publish stories that contradict that. So when the president and his spokesman say that the size of the crowd for his inauguration was the largest ever in the history of the presidency, and we know that it was not, from all available evidence, of which there is a lot of evidence, including photographs from overhead, aerial photographs, including the number of people who took the subway, including a lot of other evidence. Including ratings on television, everything that you look at, it was not the largest audience, in person or on TV for that matter. So we're going to publish that. More seriously than the size of the crowd, because who cares in the end, he has told congressional leaders that there were millions of people who voted illegally during the election. First he said several million, and then he said he went up to 5 million. There's no evidence that there was any significant fraud in the election. Nobody has pointed to large numbers of people who voted illegally. I think last I saw, there were 4 cases total in the entire United States. No state, most of the states, by the way, are run by Republicans. They have Republican governors, they have Republican legislatures. No state has found any meaningful fraud in the election. What happened after that was he said that when people said, well, if there's so much fraud, why has there not been an investigation ordered? And he saw that question, and then the next day he said, I'm ordering an investigation. Look, we're going to cover this president the way we would cover any president, and that is to try to get at the truth and to tell the truth, and we're not going to be intimidated by name calling.
Muy bien. Antes de la siguiente pregunta, solo tres pequeñas cosas. Uno, es bueno presentarse antes de preguntar, para que más que sepa quién pregunta. Dos, vamos a ser sintéticos y punto. Y tres, se agradece preguntas que no tengo nada que ver con Trump. Se pueden hacer preguntas que no tengo.
No, it's okay. It's okay. You can ask.
Vamos.
Soy Ramón Salaverría, profesor de periodismo. 2 preguntas. Una tiene que ver con cómo ha evolucionado la redacción del Washington Post. Cuando usted entró a dirigirla, este periódico estaba en decadencia y ahora pues está floreciendo, podríamos decir. ¿Cuál es la diferencia? ¿En qué se distingue la redacción de cuando usted la tomó a cómo está hoy? Y la segunda pregunta es, una de las personas que usted dirige en el Washington Post estudió en esta clase, fue nuestro alumno, Chiqui Esteban, que es infografista. No recuerdo que haya ningún otro alumno en estos momentos en el Washington Post, pero no sé. Quisiera saber qué busca usted en los jóvenes periodistas que le hace incorporarlos. Okay, I'm going to answer in English because it'll move it along more quickly and it'll be clearer, at least to me. So I think that how have we changed? Mostly we've changed after we were acquired by Jeff Bezos in October of 2013. We were already making changes before then, but everything accelerated after he acquired us. I think we recognize that the internet, as I said during the speech, is a different medium. It requires a different way of telling stories. We moved more quickly to do aggregation of other people's stories with our own reporting and our own voice. We created an overnight team that works from 10 o'clock at night till 6 o'clock in the morning that's scanning the web for the most interesting stories, and then we're jumping on those stories using some of the reporting that others have done from reputable news organizations, but also doing our own reporting at those hours, which we can still do, and then writing them better. In many instances, we get all the traffic because we wrote them better. We've actually had some Hollywood studios come to us and say they want to turn some of those stories into movies, and we say, it's not our story, we got it from somebody else, and they say, but we like the way you wrote it. And so we do write these stories better. We have, obviously, we're using a lot more video. We're using a lot more in the way of graphics. We're understanding social media. We're disseminating our work in social media. We're using social media as a source of information for our stories. We've created a whole bunch of blogs where people are writing with a strong voice and with more personality. And they're covering subjects that are of interest to a lot of people. So the culture of the internet is an example. We just decided to cover not the internet as a business, but the internet, the way that people behave on the internet. And nobody was really covering that before. And there's huge interest in that subject. We cover parenting. We have a new blog about animals. Now, it may seem frivolous, but it's not about pets, actually. It's about the world of animals. I mean, the last circus just in the United States just shut down. And one of the questions we had was, what happens to the animals? And it's a big issue because all circuses, there are no more circuses in the United States. And people are interested in those kinds of subjects, and they should be interested in those kinds of subjects. So we think of the web not as a place to put up newspaper stories, and not as a place to put up newspaper stories more quickly, but as a place that requires its own form of communication. In the same way that if you go on radio, you don't read a newspaper story. If you go on television, you don't read a radio script. You use a television script. And now we have the internet, and in our industry, the first thing we did is just put up newspaper stories, and then we said, let's put them up more quickly. And that wasn't an answer. And now we're thinking of it as, what is different about this? And we have an opportunity to show people rather than just to tell people. We can put up original documents. We can annotate those documents. We can write with more of a voice. And people want a sense of who's writing. Who is this person who is telling me this? What is their personality? And it feels more authentic. It is more authentic. And so we've incorporated that kind of thinking into everything that we do. We measure everything. We put out news alerts. We measure ourselves against others. Are we a minute before or are we a minute after? Everything. We measure our stories, whether people like our stories better than, and our headlines better than other people's headlines. We actually do a regular survey online, and you can't tell whose story it is because we use the same typeface. And then we say, do you like this story? Does the story interest you? Do you like this package of stories? Things like that. And we compare ourselves to other people. And we're required to be the best. And fortunately, we've done pretty well. So otherwise, I probably wouldn't be here talking to you. So, so there are a lot of ways that we do that. With Cheeky, who's a great alumnus of this school, we're thrilled to have him. I actually hired him at the Boston Globe when I was there, and then I left immediately after he got there. And then he went to National Geographic, and now he works for the Washington Post. Look, he's someone, what do we want from people? Exactly what I said during my remarks, and that is we want people who can teach us things. We are not just looking to hire people who will sit at our knee and just learn from us and then wait their turn. We are looking for people who can bring us skills that we do not have at all, that we don't have in sufficient supply, and we want people who are thinking creatively and coming up with their own ideas. Not all the ideas are going to come from me. In fact, most of the ideas don't come from me. In fact, only a small percentage of the ideas come from me, a really small percentage. The idea is to have everybody contributing ideas. Everybody talks about crowdsourcing. We should be crowdsourcing within our own organizations and hearing what people have, the ideas that people have. And so we want creative people like Cheeky.
Una quinta pregunta, quinta fila.
Good morning, Mr. Baron. My name is Federico. I'm a first-year journalism student, and I would like to ask you about Snowden. So I wanted to know if you took part in the decision of calling for Snowden's prosecution back in September, because in Spain we have the newsroom leadership and editorial board work together and make decisions. I understand in the U.S. they don't do that, so I would like to know if you took part in the decision, and if not, what do you think about it?
I did not take part of that decision. In fact, I knew about that decision when I read the editorial. So we have a tradition in the United States. It's not true of every newspaper, but it's true of almost most newspapers. And that is there is a strict separation between the people who write the editorials and run the opinion pages and the people who are in charge of the news coverage. So I have nothing to do with the editorials, and I have everything to do with our news coverage. Our news coverage is we worked with Snowden, we published those documents, we won a Pulitzer Prize for public service, and at the time, when we won the Pulitzer, I said that I felt that he had performed a public service by disclosing these documents. And because it showed the degree of intrusion into people's privacy, it showed how large the surveillance state had grown without any debate among the public about whether that was appropriate, about what the proper balance is between security, national security, and personal privacy. And we felt that this was information that the public needed to know, and that these are policies that should not just be implemented unilaterally by the government without any participation on the part of citizens. And so I stand by those comments that I made at the time, and the editorial page expressed its particular point of view. And obviously, my point of view is not exactly does not exactly conform to their point of view. So I stand by the statement I made at the time that he performed a public service.
Mientras preguntan, ya queda un tema. Solo quería hacer una preguntilla breve sobre esto. ¿Cómo se tomó la decisión del editorial de no pardon for Snowden?
How did, I'm sorry, who made that? I'm sorry, what was the question again?
El editorial de no perdón para Snowden.
Oh, how was that made? I don't know, actually. You know, I wasn't involved in it. I don't know, and I'm not sure I want to know. So.
Pregunta. No.
Sí. Good morning, Mr. Baron. Thank you for being here today. I'm not going to ask about Trump. In the last few days,
have been reading Hiroshima by John Thursday, and I noticed a very huge contrast in the way he writes and the way Spanish journalists used to write. And I think Spanish journalists are very based on their opinion and their ideology. And I think that John Thursday let the facts talk for him. So the question is, how much space should the opinion have in today's journalism?
Well, look, I mean, I think there's, my view is that there's a lot of room for opinion, and I have no problem with people expressing their opinion, and we should have a vigorous public debate about the issues that are important to us. So I'm fine with having plenty of opinion writers, but with regard to what we do in the newsroom, in our news coverage, my view is that we should let the facts speak for themselves. That's what we did in the case in Boston when we published the church investigation. There's a scene in that movie. How many people have seen that movie? Okay, good. So there's not enough. Go see that movie. Go get it on Netflix or whatever. But it's free on Netflix, I think. So in any event, there's a scene in that movie where I am taking out, I take out an adjective. And when journalists see that movie, they all laugh. And when non-journalists see that movie, they have no idea. They don't laugh at all. So it's true that when I edited that series, I removed every adjective I could find so that it did not appear that we were expressing an opinion, so that there were not words that the church could seize on, could point to say that we were biased. I wanted it to be almost like a legal presentation in court. Just let the facts speak for themselves, and that's what we did. In many investigations, reporters feel, and their editors feel, an obligation to tell people how important what they have is. They use a lot of language, I think often hyperbolic, about how significant this is. If you have a very significant revelation in a story, it will be evident from the facts, and you don't have to go over the top in describing how important it is, how important the revelations are. And so I believe in letting the facts speak for themselves and going from there. Now, as I said, with the internet, we do have people writing with more of a voice. So it's a tricky situation right now, and we do have to be careful that people's opinions do not color the underlying facts.
No controlo el micrófono. ¿Dónde está el micrófono? Aquí había una alumna que lleva una fila 5.
Good afternoon, Mr. Baron. Pleasure to have you here. But I'm not going to ask about Trump. You might have.
You have a Make America Great Again? Oh, great.
So my question really is, considering the fact that the media is so important in our daily lives, that we depend on it to consume our news, and now the rise of what we call fake news,
Yeah.
are you worried that the public will begin to trust less those news sources that they consider either one side of the political spectrum or another?
Yeah, I am, and that's already happened, of course. I mean, confidence, certainly in the United States, and I'm sure in the rest of the world, confidence in the mainstream press has dropped precipitously, has dropped very dramatically, and particularly in the United States, among Republicans, it's dropped to exceptionally low levels, and particularly over the last 2 years during the campaign, and probably as a result of Trump being so highly critical of the press, so which was an objective of his, and you could say mission accomplished. So. Look, it's really concerning. People are going only to sources of information that affirm their pre-existing point of view. And that has no doubt contributed to the divisions in society today. The Wall Street Journal did a very interesting experiment as they looked at a Facebook page for someone who was conservative and a Facebook page for someone who was liberal to see their news feed. These are two different worlds you're looking at, completely different. It's highly instructive. People are just living in their own universe and not hearing what other people are saying. And I do think that we have to get past that. Now, how we get past that, I don't know the answer to that. I think that, I think that we should, people have asked me, well, I was once asked, well, how do you know which source of information to trust? And it's a difficult question to answer, and I have thought about that. And I came to the conclusion you should trust a source of information that, with some regularity, offers you stories and opinions that contradict your pre-existing point of view. If it never offers you a story that challenges your point of view with facts that you might not have known, if it never offers you an opinion piece that is contrary to the opinion that you already hold, then I don't believe that that's a source of information you should probably rely on. Because no one of us has all the facts, and no one of us is always right in our opinions. And we should be open to other opinions. We should be open to stories that raise issues that perhaps challenge our way of thinking. And if you have a publication, whether it's online, whether it's or in print, or whether it's a radio station or a television station that never challenges your point of view, that is a media outlet that is pandering to you, not a media organization that's trying to tell you the truth.
Sí, yo voy a aprovechar que tengo poco de minutos y voy a hacer una pregunta. Me llamo Ramón Llorens. Mi pregunta viene desde la universidad. Se nos insiste mucho en la verdad. O sea, estamos todo el día oyendo que tenemos que decir la verdad, buscar la verdad. Pero desde el mundo exterior es todo muy relativo. Entonces, ¿cómo cree que nos tenemos que enfrentar? O sea, ¿cómo tenemos que buscar en ese mundo del relativismo la verdad? Porque es que parece que hoy en clase hemos estado 2 horas discutiendo sobre eso y todo el mundo, bueno, es que eso es muy relativo. Lo único en lo que estamos de acuerdo es que los del ISIS son muy malos. Pero todo lo demás es como todo muy relativo. Entonces, ¿cómo buscamos esa verdad?
How do we search for the truth when everything is all relative? Is that it, basically?
Yeah.
Well, I don't believe it's all relative, first of all. I think there actually are facts in this world, that facts actually exist. Now, I know that some people who take philosophy classes from time to time, you may question whether this thing exists here. I remember when I took a philosophy class in college, and I finally, after several weeks, I had to go to the professor, and I say, why am I studying this? I know this desk is here, and if it's not, so what? But I think that there are facts that can be determined, that you can provide. There is actual evidence out there. I think let's just take the crowd size. There is evidence. The number of people who took the subway, the ratings of the television stations, the aerial photographs that show the size of the crowd. If you talk about the number of people who might have voted illegally in the election, where are the people? Show me some people who voted illegally rather than just declaring that to be true. You can't just come out and say there are 3 to 5 million people who voted illegally and then not offer any evidence. People have an obligation to offer evidence when they assert terrible wrongdoing and fraud and illegality and things like that. And certainly the president has an obligation to do that. His press secretary was asked, where's the evidence? The supposed evidence that he presented, if you actually go look at it, is not in fact evidence that there were large numbers of people who voted illegally. It was evidence that many of the sort of registration for voting is out of date. Well, we know that. That doesn't mean that millions of people voted illegally. So I don't think that we just, where everything is relative, truth can never be determined. It's all a matter of people's opinion. I believe that there are truths. They're not always easy to obtain. We have to really work at it, and sometimes it's not entirely clear. But there are actual facts in this world, and I think that's our job as journalists, is to go find those facts, gather them, and try to convey what those facts really mean.
Hello, my name is Marty Baron, and I'm a student here in journalism. And I really like what you said about our parents, because I know that this career is not easy, and it's not a career that, I mean, our parents get scared. So
I've heard.
Yes,
Yeah.
So I want to know, what would you tell those parents that are scared of us studying this career?
Well, I've talked to parents who have kids going into journalism, and I always say that it's not correct to say that the field is shrinking. The field is actually growing. If you actually look at it, media as part of our lives is a bigger part of our lives than it ever has been in the past. All types of media. And the number of sources of information has really grown. There's a lot of investment that's going into media today. Investing in new startups that see the old guard as yesterday's news, as those are the institutions that are going to fail, and we are going to fill the gap. So there are many opportunities. Also for people in specialized areas, let's say your interest is music or politics or religion or art or sports or whatever it might be, there are so many new websites that are coming into existence that concentrate in those particular fields. And those represent wonderful opportunities for people. I have an interest in art. There's a website called Artsy. I don't know if anybody pays any attention to that. They're doing stories about art. They're writing about the art market. They're writing about the people in art, collectors and artists and everybody like that. And nobody talks about that site, but they're growing. They're adding people. They have real writers. They do wonderful online presentations. And there are many opportunities like that if people are interested in music or politics or whatever it might be. So I tell parents that they're mistaken if they believe this field is shrinking. Yes, there have been layoffs and cutbacks at traditional news organizations, but that's not the entirety of the field. That's just a segment of the entire field. And so the field is larger than that. So there are many opportunities. I know a lot of people in the United States who have gone into the field. They get jobs right away. And I know a lot of people who then other people who went to law school, and they can't find a job now because there's not a need for as many lawyers in the United States these days. The parents of the kids who went to law school thought their kids were going to get a great job, and the parents of the kids who went into to study journalism, they were really worried about the future of their kids, and the journalism students are doing better in many instances. So I just think that there are more opportunities than people imagine. On top of that, the skills that you learn here can be used in a lot of other fields, and that's something to keep in mind as well. Knowing how to write, knowing how to think, knowing how to investigate, those are skills that are hugely valuable and in many other fields. And if at any point you decide that this is not the field for you, you can use those skills in other ways.
Fondo allí.
Hola, buenas. Mi nombre es Marty Baron, soy periodista de periodismo y nos gustaría que me dijera usted, como director de un periódico, por qué es tan difícil llevar a periodistas a África, algo en lo que todo el mundo está de acuerdo, que hace falta llevar el periodismo, pero a la hora de la verdad los periódicos no destinan tantos recursos a África.
In Africa?
Yeah.
Well, we have correspondent in Africa. It's a big continent, and there's a lot to cover. And I would agree that we need more people there. Now we have a person in Cairo, which is in Africa, but that's not really covering sub-Saharan Africa. And we also have a correspondent in Kenya who does a lot of coverage in Africa. But only having one correspondent for all of sub-Saharan Africa is not really enough. And I think we need more. And I would hope that over time we would have more. The truth is that certainly for the United States, not enough attention is paid to Africa. Probably, and certainly in the United States, not enough attention is paid to the rest of the world. Fortunately, at the Post, we've been able to add foreign correspondents. We just added one in Turkey and one in Brussels. And we've added some other people to our foreign staff. We just launched an international newsletter this week. So there's a lot we're doing, and my hope is that over time we would just continue to add more. But I do think it's concerning that there is insufficient coverage of Africa, and I would hope that over time we can do something about that.
Bien.
And of Latin America as well, I would say.
Nos quedan unos 10 minutos y entonces veo tantas manos y soy capaz de manejar todo que tengo ya 3 identificados por lo menos para unas 3 o 4 preguntas, uno allí, otro allí. Vamos por orden.
Pedro Lozano Bartolotti, periodista, profesor emérito de la económica de ellos. Segundo, un personaje de la vida de se debate entre un mundo a la ciego, político, y una realidad totalmente opuesta, como el aborto, el negro con cadena. Esta situación tan dialéctica no se da de alguna manera en el ciudadano mediático que somos ahora todos, que vivimos una realidad personal de referencia y a la vez estamos inmersos en un mundo totalmente creado por el conocimiento colectivo en todas las. No hay ahí una ruptura o una ruptura, una dialéctica entre la realidad personal y el mundo ficticio que se nos existe. Crea los nuevos sueños del mundo de la comunicación.
That's right.
Sí, una dialéctica entre una confrontación dialéctica entre la vida personal y la vida creada por los medios.
Yeah, I know.
Si eso crea...
I told you about my difficulty with philosophy before, and I'm having that moment again right now. That's too, for me, I don't know. I'm afraid that's too abstract for me. I apologize. I need to be a different kind of thinker in order to grapple with that one.
My question is regarding how there's a lot of mistrust towards establishment media and how the word establishment itself now is embedded in the conversation. In my belief, to solve a problem, you have to know the cause of the problem. So in your years as journalists, what do you think the problem has been as traditional establishment media you've been part of? So that there's lots of millions and millions and millions, not only of Americans, but people around the world that believe that a guy that says, the New York Times is lying, it's cracking down, they truly believe that and they got him to the White House. What do you think problems that the rest of society?
Well, I think it's usually these things are there's not one cause. Some of it is ourselves. And I alluded to some of that in the remarks that I made earlier. And that is that I don't think as media we've done a good enough job of listening to certain segments of our society that we should do a better job listening to. I think that, after Donald Trump became a candidate, I think we in the United States did a pretty good job of going out and talking to his supporters and really understanding the basis for his support. But what we should have done is we should have understood that that there was that strong sentiment in the country before Donald Trump ever became a candidate. So more than 2 years ago, we should have perhaps anticipated that there could be a candidate like this, because we would have better understood and we would have reported on more thoroughly the anger, the anger, the frustration, the anxiety in certain parts of the United States that led to a candidate like Donald Trump. And the reality is that when you get out of the major cities on both coasts in the United States, you encounter a world that's very different. And that is where people have lost jobs. They don't see opportunities for themselves. They don't see opportunities for their children. They see a society that has not benefited from whatever growth we've had in the United States, which still is better than the growth of many other countries, but not everybody has shared in that growth, for sure. And we as journalists have an obligation to get out of our own world and to get into the world of other people. And that's something that we're going to work on. We're going to work on much harder at the Washington Post. We will have a team of about 8 people who will spend full time going around the country, trying to take the measure of what people think, what their lives are like, and try to explain that in an honest way. I'm not saying we didn't do that. We didn't do it enough. And perhaps we would have understood the level of anxiety in the rest of the country. So that's what I think we need to do a better job of listening to everybody in our society. And now, on top of that, there are things that we don't have control over, and that was alluded to earlier as well, and that is that now we have a proliferation of new media sites. Of all, people can go wherever they wish to on the internet and just find opinions and, worst of all, so-called facts, and I use those in quotes, that reinforce their pre-existing point of view, the way they see the world. And they look at that and they say, yeah, that's exactly right, because I agree with it. And there are many sites that have decided to make a business out of just reinforcing people's pre-existing point of view. That is as true on the right, on the left as it is on the right. I'm not saying that this is something that's unique to the right. It's not. There are many sites on the left that do exactly the same thing. And so that, I think, has also contributed to this distrust in the media, because people are looking at stories and they're saying, why am I not reading this story in the mainstream press? They're keeping it from me. They're hiding it from me. And that in itself reinforces the conspiracy theory, because these guys are presenting me the information that I know must be true because I agree with it, and I'm not reading this story in the mainstream press, which means that they're part of the conspiracy and they're hiding it. And so that is another factor that has contributed to it. And so I think that is, there are any number of other factors that have contributed to the distrust in the media as well. And no, I don't know the answer to that other than for us to just do our jobs, try to do our jobs as well as we possibly can do these jobs. And that is to try to find out the facts, tell the facts, go out into society at large, listen to lots of different people, tell their stories in an honest and honorable way, and then let our work speak for itself. I don't know that there's any other answer for us other than that, because we're not going to pander to people. That doesn't work. I can tell you that, and it's not how we ought to behave, and it's not true to our mission. It's not true to our identity. It's not true to the real purpose of genuine journalism, and so, but it's not. We're partly to blame. But there are other factors as well.
Muy bien, pues la última pregunta ya.
Well, good morning. Thank you for your time and interest for such an inspirational talk. My name is Marty. I'm studying political communication here, and I'm acting right now as a spokesperson of the master which of a class.
Wow.
We are studying political communication. And I have to say that they are experts in lobbying, so if I don't pose right now their questions, they're going to kill me right now afterwards. So I have three very brief questions. First of all, on behalf of my friend Teresa, how do you manage the relationship between influence and manipulation? Afterwards, on behalf of my friend Romela, how do you tackle the problem about new audiences and the need of speaking to new audiences in a new way, because new audiences may be more interested in things like celebrities or entertainment, and that may encounter like contradictions with serious journalism. And last but not least, my question, which was, how can journalism work in a society which is like ruled with an post-truth attitude where facts are no longer valued as a measure of reality? So if journalism is about facts and facts no longer define our world, how can journalism work with that? Thank you very much. Sorry.
All right. Okay. So the last question is three questions. So, I mean, I think I addressed the last question just now, talking about that. So I do believe that, I don't believe we're in the post-truth world yet. There are post-truth segments, and I think our job is just to be true to our mission and continue with it and try to do it as well as we possibly can. I don't know any alternative to that. With respect to new audiences, I don't believe that we have to trivialize what we're doing in order to reach new audiences, and we have not done that at the Washington Post. If you look at the most read stories on our site, and I was doing it this morning, all of them are serious stories, although all of them are about Trump. So every single one of them is about Trump. It went down the top 10. Every single one was about Trump. I was just trying to prove that serious stories are what people are interested in. But look, it is a serious matter, and he is president, and his policies are going to have a significant impact on a lot of people. And so people are reading those stories because they're interested in his policies and his politics and the way that he handles himself in office. And that's been true even pre-Trump. We found that serious stories generated large audiences. It was a matter of how we told those stories, not whether the stories were trivial. If we publish trivial stories, it will undermine our very brand, undermine our identity. There's nothing to be gained by trying to become something other than what we are. What we want to do is we want to be true to our history, true to our tradition, true to our values, but express all those in a new way that works in a new digital era. With regard to, I'm not sure about the question about influence versus manipulation, because I'm not quite sure what you're getting at. Look, our job is, certainly at the Post, our job is to try to do stories that have significant impact on the policy agenda and the political agenda in the country. Not with the idea of achieving a certain end, but telling people what they need to know. So when look, during the campaign, we were accused of being part of an effort to rig the election. Obviously, we didn't rig the election. The results speak for themselves. We don't try to rig the election. What we do try to do is, first of all, we recognize that anybody who is running for the highest position in the most powerful country on earth deserves to be scrutinized, deserves to be examined, deserves to have their entire career and history and life and all of that published, disclosed, other than perhaps the absolute most private things, and anything that has a bearing where there's a public interest, and that's our job, and that's what we did with regard to both of the candidates in the primary, the main candidates in the general election, and with regard to and in the primaries as well, where we did a lot of work, we did a lot of investigating. We did that for Trump, but we also did that for Hillary Clinton. We did that for the incredible number of candidates in the Republican field. And we feel that that's our obligation, is to tell people what they need to know. They themselves then make the decision. And that is a process that I totally respect. That is democracy. And our job is to tell people the information that they need and they deserve to know. And then it's the voters who make the decision. They can weigh in their own mind what is really important, what matters to me most. There are a lot of factors that they consider, that they have to consider, and then they make the decision, and then we have the result. And that process that we carried out throughout the election is the process that we will carry out throughout our coverage of this administration, and the way we will cover all sorts of other subjects. And it is to try to give people just the information they need and deserve to know, not with the idea of influence or manipulation, certainly not manipulation, but the idea that people deserve, in a democracy and civil society, deserve to know the issues that are most important to them, and it's our job to bring those facts to them, and then they can make their decisions.
Muy bien, pues concluimos así esta lección magistral con Marty Baron. Disculpas a quienes han quedado sin poder preguntar, había muchas preguntas. Muchísimas gracias a todos por asistir a...